right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Before we begin tonight, we have an interpreter available tonight. So I'd like to introduce briefly Carlos Cerecero for a quick announcement.
Thank you very much. I'm going to make this announcement in bilingually. We are equipped with receivers, wireless, for those who prefer to listen to the whole meeting in Spanish. I will be simultaneously interpreting in Spanish in the whisper microphone, so it will be totally non-obtrusive to the English speakers. At the time that the speak comes along, if you're a Spanish speaker, all you have to do is raise your hand, and either myself or my assistant will come and interpret aloud the questions into English so that everything will be understood by both parties, that is the English speakers and the Spanish speakers. Also, my name is Carlos Cerecero. I'm a course-certified interpreter translator with a certificate from the Judicial Council 300-249, so we don't delete, enhance, change. We say exactly what is going on. Thank you very much.
Great. I was wondering.
I was so excited about the English. Vamos a interpretar totalmente la reunión en español de manera tal de que si ustedes desean hablar y prefieren hablar en español para hacerse entender mejor, levanten la mano y uno de los intérpretes soy yo, venimos y vamos a traducir exactamente lo que dice. Soy un traductor certificado, no cambiamos, no agrandamos, achicamos, hacemos todo exactamente como se tiene que decir. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much today.
Cool. Thank you, Carlos. So first off, for public comment, and this is comment that is not, I'm sorry, roll call. Let me make a quick announcement before we do roll call. Okay, great. Roll call.
Committee Member Blackerby?
Here.
Bradley? Kaufman-Gray?
Here.
Horn?
Here.
Pritchett? Tabor?
Here.
Chair France?
Here. Great. All right. The comment I would like to make about public comment is speaking about MILPIS or speaking about MTD. You'll need to mark the items 3 or 4. And if you have comments for anything not pertaining to those 2 items, please speak in public comment. So far we have 1 public comment speaker. 4, Salinas, Inbar, 4. Great. So, Leslie, I'm going to assume that all of the speaker slips I've received are for MILPIS or East Side safety concerns. So I'm going to open up first to Rick Godfried, or Godfriend. Yes, thanks.
I just wanted to talk about a few places. I walk around by the Mission area, and I live on Bath Street. So some of the places that I've noticed that are dangerous and bad, and I have talked to transportation and also the administration about these, and have gotten very little support back. So one is at Junipero at Garden Street and Laguna. There's these ditches for drainage, and I noticed that on Pedregosa it have been fixed, but these are about 2 feet. If somebody steps down on it, you know about these? This is pretty dangerous to me. If I'm walking at night or coming from a rose garden, it's really a safety area that needs to be looked at and fixed. So I really ask Mr. Allen to look at this, please. Another one is Bath Street in Anapamu, going onto the freeway and coming off the freeway. There's no stop signs. Well, there are stop signs coming off the freeway, but I think this needs to be a 4-way because, and there is a 3-way because there is a 3-way on Castillo Street, but not on Bath. There's a lot of traffic. People don't know what to do when they come on Anapamu. In fact, I was there waiting to go from the freeway to go onto Bath Street, and another truck comes over, and he thinks he's got the right-of-way, and so I almost ran into him. So this happens all the time, so I wish transportation would look at this. And also you need a chiropractor when you go across this street, by the way. It's really bumpy, pretty bad. So, and the last one is on Junipero. I was there today, and I saw somebody in a wheelchair, and she was trying to, I was thinking she was trying to get over on it's Junipero and I believe Garden Street. On the other side of the street is a ramp for wheelchairs, but on this side of the street, there's no ramp. So she couldn't get over if she wanted to. So she said that she is talking to transportation too about, being in integrity and having it on both sides. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Can I just clarify? Did you mean Bath and Arriaga going onto the freeway? You said Anapamu?
Yeah, I always get messed
Okay,
up with everything.
totally.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you again. Mr. Allen, what for the public that's viewing, what are the best ways to submit comments to the city if they have concerns about the roadways?
They can just call the Transportation Division, 564-5385, and Kim will forward them to the appropriate person.
Great, thank you. Seeing no further public comment, again, all comment about Milpas will be addressed when we speak about the Milpas item after we speak about our next two items, so item number 4. So next, I guess, would be the approval of minutes. I do have a couple of comments about the minutes. Are there any other comments about the minutes? Mr. Tabor, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I was a little. I went through these a little differently because there's a little bit different style to the minutes than we have previously seen. Probably more of a summary style than kind of a rote repetition of everything that went on. So it was kind of important to get the gist of what happened here. And I think the main one I have was the kind of the summary at the end on page 4. My recollection was that most of the folks felt that I guess the summarizing was the potential benefit of the right-of-way may have been outweighed by the public safety concerns. And I thought it was important to state that. It kind of sums up, it says, some members of the committee would not support this closure. However, it was agreed that public safety was a priority. If we could insert after the word however, that I think the majority found that the potential benefit was outweighed by the public safety concerns. I think it would sum that up better from my recollection. And also on the front page, I didn't have copies of previous minutes, and I guess that I could have gone back through our directory on the city webpage. But have we always listed members of the public on the first page of the minutes when they come and speak at a meeting, or do we just list them on the item? For instance, on the Voluntario Street Trail easement, the members of the public who spoke are listed in there, and I was surprised to see them listed on the front page.
I believe we have mentioned listed on the front page,
Okay.
but we can double check it, just for future. But I believe we have.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Tabor. Are there any other comments on the minutes? I would like to add my comments, which echo Mr. Tabor's, that, for example, for the Voluntario Street Trail easement, it was a rather complex issue. There certainly were, from the public, comments, both positive and negative, regarding the issue, and I feel like those were not adequately represented. While I have in the past expressed a desire for more concise meeting minutes, I think these were too condensed to be a useful reference. And so, in fact, I would prefer that I think maybe we can get past for these minutes, but I would prefer in the future that they be a little bit more specific, but I'm willing to pass these minutes. All 4, motion to pass the minutes?
Is there a second?
Second? Okay, all 4?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, on to tonight's item. I'd like to introduce the review of September, October, November, and December MTD monthly reports. I believe that we have a presentation before us. Is that the case?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Sherry Fisher, the general manager from the Santa Barbara MTD, is here to present the annual report and answer any of the questions the committee might have on the other reports.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Fisher, for being here. And briefly, I'd like to comment to everyone here in the audience. Thank you all so much for being here. We requested annual report of these presentations that we get from MTD. So thank you for your patience in waiting through the MTD presentation if you're waiting to specifically hear and address the Milpa Street safety. So that said, Ms. Fisher, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair France and members of the committee. And to those members in the audience, I will also be interested in anything you have to say about Milpa Street as it relates to MTD, so I'll be staying to listen to you. So back in the 70s, MTD created something that we called the Shopper Hopper, which was a little Mercedes minibus that ran up and down State Street. Did all right, nowhere near the success that we have now. And that Shopper Hopper morphed into a agreement with the city to run some electric vehicles, pretty much the only electric vehicles of this size fleet in the nation at this point. And as you can see, we now have, in a one-year span, 526,000 passenger trips. A lot of service going up and down the street, a lot of passenger trips riding, and also we know besides that, a lot of times when we didn't have enough space for everybody. Sorry to say, there are many times when somebody has to stand and wait for the next shuttle or perhaps walk down the street. We're pleased to have this ongoing agreement with the city. The city certainly does support the downtown waterfront shuttle to a great extent. And am I holding? I am holding this, aren't I? Oh, the keyboard. Okay, thank you. Thank you. This route map shows you the two different parts of the downtown waterfront, one of them going up and down State Street purely, turning around at the Dolphin Fountain, the top at Sola Street and Victoria. And that's what we call, of course, the State Street portion of it. The red line across the Cabrillo Boulevard or our Beach Boulevard, providing what we call the waterfront portion of the service. Service hours during the summer are longer, so they start 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., yes, every 30 minutes. And they also run 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. every 10 minutes and 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. on Friday and Saturday every 15 minutes. The waterfront, 10 to 6 every 15 minutes, and from 6 to 9 p.m. on Friday and Saturday on the East Beach side only, turning around at the zoo. Sorry, I'm forgetting that I'm doing my own button here. And in the fall schedule, a little bit less service, 9 to 10 o'clock in the morning, runs every 30 minutes, and then 10 to 6 p.m. running every 10 minutes, and again, waterfront every 30 minutes during most of the year. So 526,000 passenger trips. To do that, we provided 15,190 revenue hours, and there was a cost to us to operate it of $1,528,000. But the city provided out of that over $1 million of subsidy, so that in fact, instead of charging the passenger our usual $1.75 or 10 ride tickets, etc., we're able to charge the passenger a quarter fare. And that is, in fact, what the city does for this service. Out of those quarter fares, quarter at a time, we received over $115,000 in revenue. And we look at things from a performance point of view to see how many passengers per hour. You see up there it's 34.6 or almost 35 passengers per hour. And for each passenger, it cost us $3.01. We also provide another service in cooperation with the city called the Carrillo Commuter Lot. And I'm going to leave any input that Browning might have about how the lot is run and how people can participate in this program. But this service goes, as you can see, Figueroa, Carrillo, and to the extent of Castillo and Santa Barbara Street. And basically, it is transporting people, meant to transport people from that lot down to the places of business. Although anybody may ride it, people who have an agreement with the city to use that lot get to ride for free. Anybody else can pay a quarter to ride it. So this is weekdays only. 7:15 to 9:30 a.m. and 4 to 6:20 p.m. Again, the peak hours, picking up people before and after work. Runs every 10 to 12 minutes, and there's no, as I said, there's no fare charge if you've paid the city to park in the commuter lot. 12,100 passenger trips, 1,255 revenue hours, and a total cost to MTD of $130,700, with the city paying the vast majority of that, over $102,000. That's about 9, almost 10 passengers per hour, and it costs us $10.78 for each passenger trip. And one more service that we work on in cooperation with the city, and not that we don't work in cooperation with the city on everything. I should back up and say, of course, we work in cooperation on everything. But another city-supported service, and that's the Crosstown Shuttle. You've seen these buses going back and forth, I'm sure, between the west and east side. 157,500 trips in the fiscal year that just ended in June. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, this service is turning around at the west side, Mountain, Valerio, Gillespie, coming across the Mitchell-Trainer Bridge. And I'm pleased to say we're going a little faster across that bridge than we used to, not speeding, but we do now have some lithium-ion batteries that we're using in this vehicle, and it's giving us a little more power over the bridge. We still get honked at sometimes, but this service goes down Anakiapa, across to the east side on Coda Street, coming right by our main building, coming right by here, in fact, and turning around at Gutierrez and Montecito Street, as you can see, and then coming back up Chapala through our transit center. Starts 7 a.m. in the morning, 6:30 in the evenings, only weekdays. And I just described the route to you. 23-minute headways. I know that's an odd number to give you, but that's what it takes to get around. Again, the same number of passengers, 157,500 I talked about, 6,300 revenue hours, and it costs us just a little over $656,000 to support this. The city supports this with $101,000 because they are, in fact, supporting the portion that is used by commuter lot shuttle riders, or that's the intent. So again, there's an agreement with the city that if you use the CODA lot, you may ride MTV for free on this service. And we receive from passengers $131,800 in fare revenue, and you can see there's almost 21 passengers per hour, and it costs us $5 to provide each passenger trip. I thought I'd tell you a little bit while I'm standing here about the entire MTD system. We provided 7.7 million passenger trips last year in the fiscal year on all of our routes. And there they are. Can you read those? I'm joking with you. This routes 1 through 50, you probably are familiar with the 1 and 2. That's the east side, west side. That's a lot of the reason I want to listen tonight to how we're doing on Milpas. The line 3, which is Oak Park, the line 4 to the Mesa, and the 5, 6, which goes out state and Hollister. 7 and 8 are more focused on the Goleta and the county area, but they come from Santa Barbara, going out to County Health. Line 9 is totally Goleta. 10 is the Goleta coming into La Cumbre. 11 is the trunk line going between downtown and Isla Vista. 12, an express going to Goleta. 14 goes from downtown to Montecito. 15, you're going to hear me talk about 15 a lot if you're listening to me any place that I go recently. And I'm looking at Chair Franson, hoping that the bicyclists in the room are also listening. We have an overwhelming amount of passengers riding on the 15X, which goes from Santa Catalina, we used to think of that as Francisco Torres, through Isla Vista, UCSB, and then to City College. That bus is so crowded that we have left people behind. Therefore, the one bus that's supposed to come at 7:30 in the morning, getting you to class by 8, we've had to add 2 buses, 3 buses, there's 4 buses going at the same time. That's creating a financial difficulty for us. On the other hand, we don't want to leave the students standing behind at the bus stop. So we are now in an agreement with Nova, a bus manufacturer, that we may borrow from them an articulated bus, and the other word that some people use is accordion. Basically, the middle of this bus flexes, and that bus will carry about 50% more passengers, both seated and standing. We intend to try it out on this service to show ourselves and the community whether it works well, and if it does work well, we would anticipate buying some vehicles of that size in the future. If it doesn't, we want to hear that from the community as we go along, and from ourselves, of course. Then you'll see the 16 and 17, those are both services that also go to the Mesa. The 20 and 21 are Carpinteria services coming into Santa Barbara. The 22, which is Old Mission, and if anybody's listening, please ride that Old Mission bus. It's doing so poorly in spite of the wonderful locations that unfortunately it's always at risk. 23 and 25 are services that go through the Winchester Canyon area. But back to the 24, that's a well-used express service from downtown to Isla Vista UCSB. And we showed you already the DWE. The 36 is, the 27, I'm sorry, is also a UCSB service. The 36 is the Seaside Shuttle in Carpinteria. The 37, you see, we just talked about that as the crosstown. And that larger bar on the right side there, the 2000, those are services that we provide before and after school. We are not a school bus company, nor can we be one. However, if you are going to school at any of our high schools and junior highs, we're traveling past your school at the appropriate times to allow you to use our service. And because of the fact that there are so many people who are, which again is a great problem to have, we provide additional service. So those are some boosters that do exactly what our other routes do, but they add to the service so there's more seats. And there they are in order of their use, just in case that. I just wanted to give you a feel for the service levels of use here in Santa Barbara. That's about 26,000 passenger trips a day. So we thank all of you who ride and want to listen to you. And I did want to make sure I mentioned articulated buses and got you all thinking about that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fisher, for being here tonight.
Absolutely.
Are there questions about the report?
No, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to note, adding things up, there are 1.75 million passenger trips from Santa Barbara to Isla Vista. Wow. That's taking a lot of cars off the road.
Yes.
Way to go.
Thank you. Thanks to the community.
Yeah. Real quickly, Ms. Fisher, on the last slide, I don't know if we can go back, but what does the red indicate?
Those are the services that are supported by the city of Santa Barbara. So there's not anything wrong with the color red. We're just pointing out that those are the ones we were talking about specifically tonight.
Okay.
It's not a red and blue state or anything like that.
It's not indicating panic. Great. Well, thank you so much for the report. Seeing no further questions, first off, I'm amiss during our roll call. I did not introduce. We have our council liaison present tonight. Thank you, Kathy Murillo, for attending, and thank you to everyone here. I see city staff, police officers, downtown parking representative, and many members of the public and nonprofits who are interested in this important issue. I'd like to introduce Milpa Street, item number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This item is item regarding pedestrian safety on Milpa Street. In the audience today, we have Pat Kelly, our city engineer, who will introduce this item. Also with us is Derek Bailey, the supervising transportation engineer, who will actually be making the report and talk about the various options. So we also have members of the Santa Barbara City Police Department present to answer any questions that might come up regarding law enforcement and other city staff that might be available to answer questions that might come up. So I'll open this up to Mr. Kelly.
All right, thank you, Browning. Pat Kelly, city engineer. Before I introduce Derek Bailey, our traffic engineer, I want to thank the TCC and the community at large for being here tonight. I recognize members of the TCC who attended some of the community meetings we had just recently, and also members of the audience. At these meetings, Derek and I listened to a lot of people's concern for their own and their family's safety of crossing Milpas at Ortega. We promised we would return to the community with some solutions and an analysis of those conditions and how to improve those conditions. Since that, we've defined a process that we can work together with to reach a community solution, we believe, where we first start here with the TCC, and then we will then follow up with a similar presentation to our Neighborhood Advisory Committee in early February, and then return here at the end of March with a joint meeting of the Neighborhood Advisory Committee and the TCC. Hopefully, by that time, we'll have had an opportunity to mull over many of the ideas that will be presented here tonight so we can reach, hopefully a community consensus. Derek and I were reminded at our council meeting last Tuesday by our city attorney of the law and the fact that the interests of the law and the public at large that expect any solutions regarding traffic control devices that they will be scientifically engineered for the interest of public safety. We believe that we have done this tonight, that Derek's presentation will show that that type of analysis. And with that, I'd like to introduce Derek.
Thank you, Pat. Members of the board, members of the community, thank you all very much for this chance to speak, especially the community. We need your input and your ideas, and we can't move forward without you. We're here tonight because of a tragic accident that happened last October. A young man, Sergio Romero, lost his life trying to cross Milpas Street. That's really why we're here tonight. Following that tragic accident, Pat Kelly, myself, and some members of our city police staff, we attended 2 very emotional public meetings last November. And at those meetings, we heard a lot of frustrated people about the traffic conditions on Milpas. And some of the things that I took away from that meeting about people's frustrations on Milpas was that there seems to be a lot crammed into Milpas. If we look at the city's right-of-way, which is from basically house or storefront on one side of the road to the other side of the road, we've got 4 traffic lanes, a center turn lane, and all of those lanes are 10 feet wide. That's as narrow as they can be. Just outside of that, there's parking lanes that are 7 feet wide. Again, that's as narrow as they can be. And then again, outside of that, we've got beautiful big street trees and sidewalks. And the thing about those beautiful street trees is it pinches down the sidewalks when people are walking by. And as well as you can see in the picture here, there's street lights, fire hydrants. So we've squeezed a lot into the roadway. In addition to the motoring public that we see here and pedestrians, bicycles also use this street, and transit. Everybody's using this street. And part of the problem that's happening out here is to do with the lane widths. One of the issues is when I was reviewing all of the crash history up and down the corridor, there's a lot of sideswipe crashes out here. That's one issue. There is no space for bikes. As you can see, there's a Sharrow marking in the road there, but what that means is share the lane. There's no exclusive space for bikes out there. Bus stops, buses are large, wide vehicles, and when they pull over in line with the parking lane, they do stick out into the traffic lane, and it's a tight squeeze going by there. And the most common complaint we heard, though, at those meetings was the difficulty crossing at Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali. The amount of traffic, the width of the road, and those 2 intersections are not signalized. The crash last October 7th, very tragic accident. Young man Sergio Romero and his friend were waiting at the bus stop on the northeast corner. Where's my laser? Here. Sergio saw his friend onto the bus, and after that he crossed back over the street there. A vehicle in the inside lane, the fast lane, stopped and yielded to Sergio, but a second vehicle, according to our police department's investigation, going almost 50 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour over the speed limit, swerved around that first vehicle that had stopped and struck him in the crosswalk. 2 contributing factors to this crash: speed, obviously, and passing a vehicle that had stopped to yield to a pedestrian. So since this crash happened, we've spent the last 3 months, myself and my group, spent a lot of time at all hours of the day, all days of the week, walking up and down Milpas, driving up and down Milpas, trying to understand how people use this street, reviewing traffic count data, crash data, and looking for solutions. At the meetings that we were at, the two locations we heard complaints about most was Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali. Every other intersection along this corridor between the Highway 101 and Cannon Perdido are signalized. Milpas and Ortega and Milpas Yananali are not. Just to give everyone a feel for how much traffic is using Milpas, in the upper left-hand side of your screen here, that's the neighborhood north of Cannon Perdido. Milpas is one lane in each direction. There's about 8,600 cars a day use that section. And as we move south, past Ortega, it climbs up to about 15,700. And then once we're south of Haley, all the way down to the freeway, we're in excess of 20,000 cars per day. So the traffic really transitions from lower volume in the neighborhood to quite busy near the freeway. This is the process that we're proposing to move forward. Tonight, presenting some viable solutions to the community. We need community input. We need reactions from the TCC. We're also going to be taking this presentation to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee 2 weeks' time. And then in March, we're planning on having a joint meeting between the TCC and the NAC where we'd like to get a final recommendation that we can take to our City Council and get some improvements built. We looked at a lot of alternatives for crossing conditions at Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali, and I'm going to quickly go through some of the non-viable options. The existing marked crosswalks and signs are not a viable option. We should not leave things the way they are. They were a good solution when they were installed decades ago, but now traffic volumes are such that they're no longer a viable alternative. Traffic signal. When we study whether or not a traffic signal should be installed, it basically comes down to two things. Will the traffic signal improve safety? Will the traffic signal improve efficiency? And what we found is not only will the traffic signal not improve safety, but it might be detrimental to safety. And as well, a traffic signal at a low-volume intersection like Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali would decrease efficiency. As well, it was one suggestion we got from one of the community meetings was a pedestrian overpass. This would be very costly. The approach ramps for pedestrian overpasses or underpasses are very long, and it'd be very difficult to construct in those locations. And as well, it wouldn't really fit in with the character of the neighborhood. At the community meetings we attended, there was a very strong focus on traffic signals and the need for traffic signals at those two intersections. And I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about that and why I don't believe that a traffic signal will improve safety at these intersections. Traffic signals do not make crashes go away. Crashes happen at traffic signals. If you look at our top 50 crash locations in the city, 48 are at signalized intersections. Based on our experience operating other signalized intersections along Milpas, I looked at the number of broadside collisions that are happening at other signalized intersections and compared them to Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali, and we're 2.5 times more likely to have a broadside collision at a signalized intersection along Milpas than compared to Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali. And broadside collisions in an urban environment are among the worst type of crashes we can have. Property damage, injuries, potentially loss of life. These are the kind of crashes that we would definitely want to avoid. As well, going back 10 years, looking at the number of pedestrian-involved collisions, there's been 2 at Milpas and Ortega, 2 at Milpas and Yananali, and the signalized intersections have averaged 2. So, some viable alternatives. There is some good news. We have some viable alternatives. It may seem counterintuitive, but removing or relocating transit stops could improve safety. We'd be reducing the pedestrian crossing activity at those 2 intersections. And the pedestrians could cross and access bus stops at signalized intersections. And as well, this may also seem counterintuitive, but removing the marked crosswalks would be an improvement, safety-wise. research has shown that in high volume, wide streets like Milpas, pedestrians are more likely to be involved in a crash in a marked crosswalk than an unmarked crosswalk. Now, this isn't our preferred alternative, but it is an improvement over existing. This just shows the location of some of the transit stops along Milpas. And two we would be talking about here is this one on the northeast corner of Milpas and Ortega, and here on the northwest corner of Milpas and Yananali. Some viable alternatives for the north end of Milpas: median refuge island with pedestrian activated flashing lights, or a neighborhood transition striping plan. This is a concept of a median refuge island for Ortega. What a refuge island does is it essentially turns a pedestrian crossing into crossing two smaller roadways. You only have to deal with crossing half the road at a time, one direction of traffic at a time. So it's essentially you're crossing a few lanes, you get a break, and then you can deal with the other few lanes. You don't have to look for a gap in traffic and try and analyze both directions of traffic as a pedestrian all at once. What we could do at Ortega is build new pedestrian ramps just around the corner from the existing sidewalk ramps. The existing sidewalk ramps are right at the corner. What that would do is it would align the crosswalk such that we could have an actual refuge. We could build a median island that a pedestrian could actually wait in the middle. That gives a pedestrian a sense of protection on both sides of them. Oh, I do need to mention, in order to find enough space to install a median refuge island, we would have to eliminate some parking. Like I said earlier, everything out there right now is as narrow as it can be. So we don't have any ability to steal any room from existing traffic lanes. So what we'd essentially have to do is bend the lanes around the center of the road so that we could fit something like this in. And that would take away a number of existing on-street parking spaces. And those parking spaces are important to our businesses along that street. So that's a very important consideration. As well, we could supplement the median refuge island with some pedestrian activated flashing lights. We looked at several different kinds of lights. We looked at just beacons, a flashing yellow beacon. What we found with those, based on research, is they have very low driver yielding rates, like in the 30% range. And that's huge. Only 30% of drivers are yielding to pedestrians, and the pedestrians have an expectation that the driver is going to yield to them, and that creates conflicts. So we don't consider that type of device feasible. We also looked at in-street, in-pavement flashing lights. Again, the yielding rate wasn't so good, like 50 to 60%. And as well, some of the jurisdictions that we talked to that have them said there's maintenance problems. They're not very reliable. So again, we don't consider those feasible either. The one I'm showing in the picture here is called an RRFB. That's a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. It was recently approved for use in the state of California. This picture was shown here is in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida. These have shown to have a driver yielding rate in the 80–90% range, which is quite good. Federal Highway Administration did a study of the installations in St. Petersburg, as well as some installations in Washington, D.C. and Chicago, Illinois. And what they found was driver yielding rates, even on streets as wide as Milpas, can be in the 80–90% range. I've got a very short video that I'm going to show just so people can see what they look like. This is from a manufacturer. I'm not endorsing their product, but they've got a good video on YouTube. This is in Berkeley, California. So you can see they're quite noticeable. They really grab a driver's attention. Now, one difference between that street that you just saw and Milpas is wider. That street had 3 lanes of traffic and a parking lane. Milpas, including parking lanes, is 7 lanes wide. So these devices alone probably wouldn't be as effective as they would be elsewhere. Just the reason being, they'd be off to the side of a driver's cone of vision. So the advantage of having a median refuge island is we could install a third device in the center of the roadway. That way, as a driver's approaching, you've got these 3 devices in front of you. It would really grab your attention. Another alternative is a neighborhood transition striping plan. When I showed the traffic volumes earlier, the traffic volumes were lower up in the neighborhood, like in the range of 8,600 today, a day. As we moved south past Ortega, the volumes were about 15,700 a day. With those types of volumes, we can do this type of lane configuration, basically providing 1 lane in each direction, center turn lane, bike lanes, and parking lanes. We could only do this north of Coda, though. South of Coda, the traffic volumes are too high, and we'd be causing considerable congestion. Some advantages to this layout is there's fewer lanes to cross for the pedestrian. That's positive. There's space for bikes, and as well, we could make all the traffic lanes a little bit wider. That would reduce the number of sideswipe crashes. And as well, parking maneuvers would be easier because you're separated from the traffic lanes. This picture that I'm showing here is taken of Upper De La Vina Street near Trader Joe's. This street is 56 feet wide. Milpas is 64 feet wide, so 8 extra feet on Milpas. That means we could do a striping plan similar to this and have 4 extra feet on either side of the road for a future sidewalk widening project. And that would provide more space for pedestrians. There are some differences, though, between De La Vina, Upper De La Vina, and Milpas. One being the traffic volumes. This section of De La Vina is about 12,000 vehicles per day, and like I said, around Ortega, 15,700. So almost 30% more on Milpas. As well, crossing De La Vina here, it's better than Milpas, but it's still not easy. So while this would be an improvement, going even further and installing a median refuge island with a configuration like this would be an improvement yet. So there is an option to mix and match the alternative, so to speak. Like I said, this could be done north of Coda. Of course, there will be some increase in delay to traffic, and that's very important to consider as well. The place where it would be most noticeable is at the signalized intersection of De La Guerra. Pardon me. That is the only traffic signal that this roadway striping plan would go through. So any restriction in traffic when the light at De La Guerra is red is where that would be noticeable. On average, during the peak hours, vehicles would probably experience about an extra 5 seconds of delay going through that intersection, but that's an average. So for everyone that sails right through the intersection, there might be somebody else that experienced 10 to 20 seconds of delay, perhaps even more. The queues during red lights will be longer, but everybody that arrives on a red light will get served during one light. I don't think anybody will have to wait multiple lights to get through. Viable options for Yananali. Because the traffic volumes on Milpas at Yananali are that much higher than they are at Ortega, the striping plan just isn't feasible. We'd be causing considerable congestion down in that area. So the viable option at Yananali is a median refuge island with pedestrian activated flashing lights. The configuration at Yananali would have to be a little bit different. Because of existing driveways, street lights, and fire hydrants, there isn't the opportunity to move the ramps around the corner and send the crosswalk through the median. Instead, the pedestrian would be waiting at the end of the median if they had to wait at all. But the positive thing about this configuration is that it gives us that place in the middle of the road to add that third device, the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. Some things to consider about this layout, just like at Ortega, we would have to take up some existing on-street parking spaces to make this work. And as well, there's a business on the northeast corner with a driveway right about where the curb word is. Their left turn access would be affected. If on-street parking and that access, losing that is not feasible, another alternative is actually eliminating a left turn lane and left turn access into one side of the road or the other. I'm not showing this alternative, but it is an alternative. And as well, that would give the pedestrian space in the middle of the road to wait and deal with one side of traffic on one side of the road at a time. Like I said, again, this could be supplemented with some pedestrian-activated flashing lights. Additional improved options that we could improve traffic safety on Milpas is we can improve the traffic signal indications. The side indications along Milpas, these guys right here, and as well the indications that face the side street, they all have 8-inch lenses. Traffic signals come in two sizes, 8-inch lenses and 12-inch lenses. The one on the mast arm hanging out over the road, that's 12-inch. The surface area of that light is twice the size of the 8-inch lens. So it's more noticeable to people. People are more likely to stop at red lights. When we have a red light running problem, that's one thing we usually do is we get rid of the heads with the 8-inch lenses and replace them with 12. As well, most of the signalized intersections on Milpas do not have pedestrian indications parallel to Milpas. So if you're walking from this corner closest to us here, right behind the tree, and heading over there towards the signal pole that's shown, there's nothing telling you whether or not you can walk or how much time is left in that phase. So we're proposing we could add pedestrian countdown timers there as well, and that would give pedestrians more information and improve safety. Just to recap the viable options for the north end, we could consolidate the bus stops into other locations. We could remove the marked crosswalk. We could install a median refuge island with pedestrian-activated flashers, or do a neighborhood transition striping plan, or a combination of all of these. At Yan and Ollie, like I said, the neighborhood transition striping plan would not work, so there are three alternatives: consolidate bus stops, remove crosswalks, or install a median refuge and pedestrian-activated flashing lights. The next steps, where we go from tonight, we need input from the community and reactions from the TCC. There's some very important questions to consider. What does the community think about moving bus stops or eliminating bus stops? What does the community think about potentially eliminating a traffic lane? What does the community think about losing on-street parking or left turn access associated with the median refuge islands? These are all really important questions that we need to talk about. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to go present to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, and then in March, we'll be back here to have a joint committee meeting with the TCC and the NAC, where we hope to get a recommendation that we can take to City Council. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bailey. It was well researched, and appreciate your presentation. Should we move to our comments first or public comment first?
It's really the pleasure of the committee. We have quite a few members of the audience. You might want to have them make their comments first.
Okay. How about any quick points of clarification or questions just on the matter of the content
I had one. The dates of the meetings with the Neighborhood Advisory Committee and then the joint one, when and where are those?
The Neighborhood Advisory Committee meeting will be February 8th, 6 p.m. Sarah, do you have a location? Franklin Community Center?
The joint TCC meeting with the Neighborhood Advisory Committee will be in this building, in this room, on March 22nd, and it'll be at 6 p.m. And that meeting will be televised.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Is that okay? How about if you could just fill out one of these slips? Okay, well then, it'll come up. Thanks. Any other? Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Bailey. I'd like to move to public comment. Thank you to all of you for your patience and for your time tonight. We'd like to start with Mr. Levi Sachs. And for your all's information, we're only going to have 2 minutes per speaker. I'm going to time you, and if you start to go over 2 minutes, I will try to politely wrap you up. I apologize if I come off impolitely. So to start, Mr. Sachs, to be followed by Mr. Goodfriend. Mr. Sachs, maybe Mr. Tabor can get you a microphone right there. Thank you so much.
I lived just off of Cabrillo Boulevard for a while, and crossing the street there from across Cabrillo was a real challenge. And they put up a sign for a while right in the center, as they're typical to what he was showing, and it worked very well. And it was a very dangerous, and then they took it away. I don't know why they did that. But you drive around, people are standing on the corner trying to cross the street. I don't see anybody stopping anywhere. It's like it's a law that nobody knows about. The pedestrian has the right of way. Once they step off the curb, they have the right of way. Even if they're just facing the street, they have the right of way. I think those blinking signs is the best way to go. I think the parking issue on Milpas is really the biggest hazard of it all. You have buses going down there taking up a street or a lane and a half. And this is just obvious to anyone. If you go down in a truck of any size, you're going to go in the center lane because there's not enough room on the right lane. There should be either no parking or parking on one side of the street only. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
So if you notice, if you're on State Street, is this on? If you're on State Street, there's a light every block. You know, that's a cruising street, right? I mean, we know that. If you're on State Street, you're not going to go anywhere fast. But every block, there's a light. Now, I think the Transportation Department, they have this mindset of efficiency over safety. And this is ludicrous to me, that safety should come first. If I talk to somebody in transportation, the first thing I hear is, no, we can't, no, we can't, no, we can't, no, we can't. You hear the negative, always a negative. Today, the same thing. You hear, we can't do this because we can't do this. We need to, find viable ways where things are safe and not so efficient. De La Vina, Cabrillo Street is horrible. You try to cross there, and people can't see you. If one car stops, that you can't see. I mean, it's ludicrous, again, not to have lights on Cabrillo, but we're talking about Milpas. So put a light, spend some money, put a light on each block of Milpas, because it's dangerous. None of these crosswalks. Goleta Old Town has a great crosswalk. I didn't hear that. And it's all lights and everything. But just spend some money. Put a light so nobody gets killed. There's no accidents. And I think that's a best viable way. Otherwise, make it a 2-lane street. That would be interesting. But I think putting the lights up would cost money, but it's going to bring safety. And I hope their Transportation Department changes the consciousness to, yes, we can, and we care about our safety. We care about your safety, and that we're going to do that. We're going to take care of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Good Friend. Senora Romero? Sí. Okay, great. Thank you. Y gracias por estar aquí con nosotros.
Hi, my name is Ana Rico. I'm going to speak on behalf of Guadalupe Romero, the mother of Sergio Romero. She wants to thank everyone, and especially to you guys, for everything that they're doing, and she wants to keep everything in mind that she just heard and think about it, and she's going to go through all that. She wants to say thank you, though. Excuse me.
Thank you. All right, Enrico? So, great, it's you. To be followed by Eva Inbar.
Okay. My name is Ana Rico, and I do have 2 things. Milpas and Llano Nali is what they were talking about. It's really dangerous. I don't cross through there because it's really, really dangerous to cross. There's been accidents there, and I guess people do use it because there's a bus stop right in front. That's another thing. The other thing is Salinas and Cacique. I almost got run over 2 days ago. The car let me through, but the one that was coming this way did not stop, and instead of slowing down, she stepped on it. And I was walking with my 2 children. So if there was a car coming on this side, the same way that I was walking, if he wouldn't have drove in the same time as I was walking, I would have got run over and never made it to school. So that, it's really scary because there's a lot of kids that walk to Cleveland, and it's really dangerous. Also, the bus stop on Caciques and Llano Nali, There's no ramp for disabled kids or on wheelchairs. That's another thing that I've seen. Those are the only things I have to say.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Ms. Inbar, to be followed by Leslie Simon.
Good evening. I'm Eva Inbar. I'm with Coast Coalition for Sustainable Transportation, and we've been working intensively in the East Side under the East Side Walks project, so I'm very familiar with the area. I would like to address some of the points that in the staff report. First, relocating bus stops. I'm uncomfortable with that. I do not think it's a solution. It moves the problem around, and you do remove one of the pedestrian generators, but you do not make the intersection any safer. On the contrary, for those people who still do cross there, it's less safe because there are now even fewer pedestrians and cars expect them less. It's also may tie our hands because the numbers are now down and we may not qualify even for the flashing beacons. And I would like that to be addressed too, what kind of thresholds there are for these flashing beacons, because I know some of these do have warrants attached to them, certain numbers that you have to meet. So I would urge you to go very carefully and be very careful about moving bus stops around. I've heard that proposed in other places as a solution. It is not. Okay. Alternative one, removing a crosswalk. With all due respect, I do not feel it's a viable solution. I was surprised to hear it presented as such. It's obviously counter to city policies, and I would want to say no more about it. Alternative two, the median refuge. I like that idea. I would like to see it explored if it's feasible, especially if it's combined with one of those rapid flashing beacons. I've heard good things about those, and I think that, you know, in combination could actually be a fairly safe solution. You know, given the fact that we're not going to get a signal, we don't meet the warrants, so it doesn't look good for that. That still is the best solution for me, but I think that is the next best. The other thing is enforcement. I would like to hear a word from our friends in the police department. I have not heard anything about enforcement, and that's an important part of any kind of traffic safety analysis or solutions for Milpas. So please, if our friends would like to say a word or two about what enforcement they're going to conduct.
Thank you, Ms. Inbar.
Road diet, that's interesting, but it needs a lot more study. So I would like to hear more about it before I even can say what, you know, I think about it. So I think we look forward to hearing more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Inbar. Ms. Simone, to be followed by Rose Aldana.
I don't have a lot to say. I was interested to hear what they had to say about possibilities. I live on Ortega Street and have for many years, and have seen scary lots of almost accidents on the corner of Ortega and Milpas, partly because people they're trying to turn left from Ortega, and they have to go fast because they have to get, and then there's tons of pedestrian traffic there. We have Super Rica, we have the Alpha Thrift now, the bus stop, and the junior high. And there's constant foot traffic across Ortega on one side of Milpas especially, bikes on the sidewalk, everything. And I have felt that a light would be better, but the crosswalk thing sounded pretty good to me, with the flashing lights. And maybe having just one crosswalk instead of two, because people have to watch drivers have to watch activity in two crosswalks at the same time. But I wanted to ask you about the median. The median sounds great too, because you need an island to stand in if you're trying to get
Ms.
across
Simone,
the street.
could you please speak to the microphone?
Sorry.
And Mr. Bailey, if you'd be prepared to come up to the microphone and answer her question.
Okay. I wanted to ask if that's going to eliminate the possibility of turning left onto Ortega.
No.
Okay.
The answer was no.
Okay. Well, basically, it's just a very dangerous intersection, and it seems like a light would be better, but, this crosswalk might be okay. It won't be better for driving. We all avoid that intersection. That's why probably there are less accidents there, because nobody wants to turn. I mean, very few people turn left from Ortega. I go to Coda. If I'm turning left, I always go to Coda.
It's avoided. Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Bailey.
Chair France, could I just, I think a visual would help.
Okay, we're answering the question regarding a left-hand turn being impaired.
And that question is a good question, and it really leads to why moving the crosswalk back a little bit to here enables us to send the crosswalk through the median. If you compare this outline, and if you look where the end of the median nose is, right there, and then if we look at the one for Yananali, if we were to do the same thing here and have a median on either side of that crosswalk, that crosswalk has to be in a straight line between the ramps. That's going to be a fixed feature at Yananali. If we were to build a median on either side of that crosswalk, it would stick out into the intersection. And it would be awkward to drive around. People would hit it. And people pulling off the side street would be spending more time and focus trying to maneuver their way around that median island, and that sets them up for a broadside. That's not good. That's what we want to avoid. So it's purposeful that we keep the median out of the intersection.
All right. So to go back to Ortega, would the extension of that median island prevent left turns, or would the vehicle move more into the middle of the intersection and still be able to make a free left turn?
Left turn in which direction, Chair?
I'm sorry, from Milpas heading south onto Ortega.
Oh, so like this left turn?
That indicated
here?
left turn, yes.
Yeah, that movement wouldn't be affected. It's not so visible. This is a left turn lane here that they can make a left turn.
Great.
Yeah, wouldn't be affected.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Bailey. Ms. Aldana, to be followed by Ms. I believe Naomi Green.
Hi, I'm Rose Aldana, and the reason that I'm here is I'm just following up on a petition that I submitted to City Council on November 20th. It's a petition dated November 1st, and it's regarding the request for lights at Ortega, pedestrian lights at Ortega and Yananali Streets. I submitted 514 signatures. The majority of the signatures were residents from the neighborhood of Ortega and Milpas and Yananali Street area. And they do request lights, pedestrian lights. For the reason is that they prefer to walk to their neighborhood stores. They prefer to walk to church, to their schools, to avoid driving. And that's their preference. And the reason that this was put together was because of the concern of the deaths that have happened in the neighborhood. Furthermore, just in conversation about these matters, I've come across a gentleman that his grandfather was crossing Bond on Milpas by Kentucky Fried, and as he was crossing, someone off of Milpas made a turn and hit him, killed him 10 years ago.
Wow.
I can obtain the actual name and police report to you if you'd like. But it seems that we need to slow traffic down. I know that we have the bus lines. I think that eliminating the bus stops is not a good thing. It seems to me that flashers in the middle, some kind of a beacon in the middle of these streets is a good thing. Helps to identify that there is pedestrians that are trying to cross. To be stuck in the middle of Milpas Street on an island is somewhat frightening, I would think, with so much traffic going by. So the beacons as well as pedestrian lighting, it seems would make more sense. So is that all four corners on Milpas Street, along that 1 mile stretch from the freeway to Canon Perdido have lights, and everyone has public safety, from pedestrians to bicyclists to drivers on mopeds, motorcycles, or cars. Everyone is safe, even though if there is that pedestrian that says, okay, I'd like to cross, we have flashing lights, it may slow down the traffic just for that, 15 seconds, 20 seconds to cross, but at least everyone is safe.
Thank you, Ms. Aldana.
Thank you.
We appreciate your work. Naomi Green, to be followed by our last speaker, Sharon Byrne. If anyone had not submitted a form and would like to speak, I'll give you your last opportunity to speak on this item after Mrs. Byrne. Thank you, Ms. Green.
My name is Naomi Green, and I'm a long-term resident of Aliso Street, which, of course, you know, is one over from Milpas. And I'd like to say first that I think we are affected on Aliso. It's not just Milpas. It's a street like Alisos because at a number of intersections with only stops on one side, in other words, one-way stops, not two-way stops, or two-way stops, not four-way stops. There have been accidents. I know a lot at my intersection, which is Coda and Alisos, but also Montecito and Alisos, because cars are coming fast, and there are hills, and you can't see. So I would if we are looking at the Milpas corridor, or at the Milpas issue, I would like to ask that maybe other streets be looked at. And Alisos is going to be more traffic, because once the freeway access to the beach opens, you'll be able to access it through Alisos, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a major north-south beach mountain street. So that, but above and beyond Alisos or Milpas, I would just like to urge that we think less in terms of traffic efficiency and more in terms of people on the streets, of encouraging people to take buses, of encouraging people to walk. And some of the things I've heard proposed are not encouraging one to walk. For instance, I'm a senior citizen. I take the buses. So to eliminate certain bus stops means I might have a 15-minute walk to a bus. And I wanted to thank the MTD woman who spoke. I'd like to say that buses have been reduced. The 37, for instance, it's a 37, isn't it? The time between buses has been reduced. Why don't we think maybe about, instead of reducing buses, having a tram up and down Milpas the way we have a tram up and down State? Why don't we think about Milpas more in terms of the way we think about a state than as simply as an efficiency traffic corridor? And that would mean traffic lights. That would mean cutting out lanes. That would mean cutting out parking spots. That would mean having a bike lane. All those things which we're told are not in the interest of efficiency. And I don't know, efficiency means having cars move. It doesn't seem to mean that you care about people. So that's it. That's what I wanted to say. And I'd like to urge the committee to look at those, to think about those issues. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Byrne, thank you.
I'm actually Miss Byrne, to my mother's disappointment. I'm still single. I'm with the Milpas Community Association, and I want to echo some of the things that some of the other speakers have said. The neighborhood would like to ask very much that in your planning and your looking, first, we are disappointed that there's not going to be traffic lights. That is something we had felt would be the ultimate safety precaution in the neighborhood. Pedestrian lights are, however, a good short-term solution. We're okay with that. I think I would like to say that one of the things that we've noticed about Milpas Street, probably nothing that you haven't noticed, it's a very heavily trafficked street for a lot of reasons. 4 major supermarkets, a lot of construction industry, a lot of gardening industry, a lot of restaurants, and guess what? A lot of people do drive trucks and cars to use those businesses and do business with those businesses. At the same time, there's a large residential surrounding area, and there are a lot of walkers, bikers. The street is fairly pedestrian hostile in that the sidewalks are only one person wide in many places. This was a really big concern with the recent approval of Fresh and Easy, right, that there was, very little sidewalk space and the store goes right to the edge of it. What we would like to ask you is to please think very long-term in your process, that this is an old L.A. 1950s style traffic street. It does have a large traffic volume. We expect that, understand that. I'm not asking you to constrain it, but you could use the elimination of the parking lane to do something more constructive, like extend the sidewalk out further, remove the ficus trees that are causing a lot of problems already on the street, put in a real bike lane with a curb. And I think some of the businesses would be very, very interested in that, especially if we use some of the underutilized space on the street for public parking and had a tram like Naomi described. In other words, please redesign the street. Please think of a long-term strategy for that street that embraces all uses of it, not one over the other, not disadvantaging one over the other, just very balanced that accommodates the type of traffic, pedestrian and vehicle and bicyclist that likes to use that street. And it keeps everyone safe. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. That was a lot of information. Thank you to everyone who spoke and everyone who's here. Let's start again. I don't know, Mr. Tabor, to put you on the spot, but we can go comments through the table.
That's what I'm here for. Thank you, everyone, for coming. As a land use planner, I was trying to think of how to describe Milpas, but a lot of the terms we typically use kind of escape description of this area. It's kind of the general plan process. A lot of the things that we were trying to force on downtown are already happening on Milpas Street. It's a lively, dynamic, mixed use, busy. A lot of stuff goes on there. A lot of people are out enjoying that area all at the same time, and it's a great little community. With that comes some problems and some difficulties. Driving around the city and kind of look at something to compare this to, there really wasn't anything to compare it to. You look at De La Vina Street, and De La Vina Street is open, and obviously it just seems less busy. Even though there are more cars on the street, it seems less busy. There's less people walking. There's less parked cars. It's not as squeezed together in a small space. It's Upper State Street, Cliff Drive, there really is no comparison to what is going on here. I think staff explained it well in describing the 10-foot lanes and then the 7-foot parking lane. Try to get a 7-foot parking space approved by the land use people in the city of Santa Barbara. They would not allow that. Yeah, that's what we have there. And I think any of us who have parked on Milpas Street or used to park on Milpas Street, I'm one of the people who used to park on Milpas Street. I'm guilty of going over onto one of the side streets to park because it's hard to get out of your door. And there are side swipes that happen along there all the time. So it's with that busyness comes some issues. I'm glad to hear that we're looking towards solutions. I appreciate Ms. Green opening up the discussion to a lot larger discussion in the Milpas area. I think in the midst of all that busyness, some things that are, I think if there's a regularity, it seems more normal, and it seems it takes away some of the busyness, and I think that is why I think there may be at least a glimmer of an argument for having traffic signals at Yananali and Ortega Street. I think the drivers coming down the street know there's a signal at every intersection. They will know how to proceed through that neighborhood in an orderly way rather than having things different at every intersection. But I understand the arguments and don't want to cause any more broadside collisions. I appreciate the flashing signals. I was in Washington, D.C. and rented a car and was driving through the city, and it's a very exciting city to drive through, and all of a sudden there was just, it seemed like I'd won a game show or something. Things were lighting up on the street, and it got my attention, and all of a sudden you go, whoa, there's yellow signs there, there's somebody crossing the street. And it was one of those 120-foot long streets, and it was a long time to wait for it, but those do get your attention. And I think if there were, even though it's busy with the trees and the signs and the lights and the parked cars and everything on the sides, the idea of getting one of those in the middle of the street, I think, would make that a very, very noticeable feature that our busy commuters would pay attention to. It's hard not to pay attention to something like that. I would also like to explore the idea of I forget what staff called it, but I would call it changing it from a 2-lane street from a 4-lane street to a 2-lane street down Dakota Street. I think the traffic volume there would work. I appreciate the comments about the De La Guerra intersection not becoming a two-trip intersection if we went that route. It would bring traffic around Anapamu on a one-lane configuration down Milpa Street, and then Coda Street is where the junior high is, so it's kind of a logical break point there anyway to get kind of people in and out of the junior high school and hopefully make things a little easier for kids getting back and forth along there. So I would support exploring that. I also agree with the comments about the bus stops. I think the more we've heard that walking is something people avoid there, moving the bus stops would make people walk more. I think just in that alone would make it a bad idea. So encouraging bus use and encouraging pedestrian activity to me would mean having the bus stops where they are. I don't mind shifting them, but I don't think the idea of combining them is a good idea at this stage. I think that's it. There's a lot more little things on here, but I think that sums it up, my opinions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Tabor. If anything comes up, we'll do maybe a quick second round. Ms. Horn.
I do want to thank everybody for coming. That's what makes the most sense, is hearing from the community. And I know it's a big challenge to get out in the evening, so thank everyone for coming. One of the main issue for me is the safety of the pedestrians in the area, and in my experience, having seen what happened in Cliff Drive with making fewer lanes and experiencing that as I live in that area, it makes me think that reducing the number of lanes, given how crowded it is on Milpas with all the lanes, is really a good idea. And it would serve so many purposes for safety of all the people that are using it, drivers as well as pedestrians, bikes, buses, every mode of transportation. So I also had the experience of in my area, the west side is got San Andres going through it, and there was an almost identical accident, in some ways identical. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but at San Andres there was also a young woman, a young girl actually crossing at a crosswalk at San Andres and Micheltorena, I believe. And a car stopped for her, and another car did the same thing, went around very fast and didn't see the pedestrian until she was hit. And she was paralyzed. And so having seen that and having been affected by that and by Mr. Romero's same situation, I feel like that the most important thing is to have fewer lanes and safer for everybody. And I really like the idea of combining some of the other things with the middle median and the flashing lights. I was happy to hear that it wasn't two flashing lights far on the sides, adding more clutter to all that's going on those streets visually, but adding one to the middle so that it would be much more visual. And the last thing is that I would just mention is I didn't really hear too much of a discussion about changing the MTD bus stops, and I don't really understand what the options are there, but I was glad to hear the comments on those things. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Horn. I'd like to pass on 3 comments that were emailed to me. One is from Mr. Joel Schwimmer. The summary of his notes echoes some of the public comment we received, that it's not just Milpas that in this area is unsafe, that there are serious safety concerns for pedestrians in the entirety of the Milpas corridor. The next comment I'd like to pass on is from Mark Bradley, who sits on this committee, who was unable to be here tonight. He agrees that moving the MTD bus stops might be a good idea, but it's not significant compared to what we're attempting to do. Removing the crosswalks is something that he has a conflict with. While it might statistically make people more safe, it it's not really viable. It does not address the problem at hand. And lastly, he favors adding the median island and a flashing beacon at both intersections. Even if this requires removal of a number of parking spaces, that would be a reasonable price to pay if it would reduce the chance of another fatal accident. Lastly, I'd like to thank Mr. Aldana, Ms. Byrne, and Mr. Alvarado for sending a letter, I believe, to the Transportation Circulation Committee, perhaps also to Council. It outlined 3 points. One was immediate steps, such as targeted enforcement, a speed trailer indicating speed of passing traffic, repainting, just adding paint to the existing crosswalks for improved visibility, and placing a paddle sign saying "State law: yield to pedestrians in crosswalk." Just putting something out there to remind people, as you mentioned, sir, Mr. Sachs, that it seems to be a law that is not known, that you have to yield to pedestrians in a crosswalk. Also, to conduct a public education campaign, and that they will work on a media campaign to slow down Milpas. The targeted enforcement is something I'll ask a question if we have perhaps Officer Hunt, one of our police officers, in a moment. Midterm steps. They feel that adding signals at Ortega and Yananali Street will be the safest and least confusing solution to the problems that we've been experiencing. And then the long-term solution, we call on the City of Santa Barbara to form a blue ribbon committee to develop a comprehensive long-term Milpas revitalization plan that would include updating and re-engineering the street to make Milpas safer for all users and a place where businesses can thrive. The group would include city representatives, our stakeholder groups, neighbors, and local business owners. So thank you for those comments, and I'll pass on to Ms. Blackerby.
Okay, so I have quite a few, and I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, whether you spoke or not. It really means a lot to me that you're standing up for your community, and obviously with the tragic accident, that unfortunately sometimes is what it seems like is what it takes to spur folks into action on safety. I really appreciate the compassion with which Mr. Bailey's presentation was given. And I see the city has a real understanding of there's a problem and we have to solve it. I really, really appreciate that. I do think that, and it's kind of been mentioned a lot of times with the engineering hat on, ideas like, definitely I understand the warrant situation for traffic signal, that it's not legal, basically, to put them in. But I also understand from a community level, moving or eliminating bus stops and just eliminating crosswalks, while that may technically be an engineering solution, is obviously not a solution at all, and would shut down the neighborhood even more pedestrian-wise. I think the 12-inch lenses are crucial. I think the pedestrian countdowns, we should have that at every intersection, in the city that's signalized. The one question I had was the speed limit throughout the corridor. I don't know if I saw that written on there. I think I know what it is, but if you could share, just so the public gets an idea.
Mr. Bailey?
The speed limit is 30 miles an hour.
From Anapamu to the freeway?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we recently did a speed survey as part of our study, and the results of the speed survey, I should have made this into a slide. I'll have that ready for you next time, and I can certainly distribute it. But with the speed limit of 30 miles an hour, there's about 96% of traffic is going below 35. So there's only 4% that are going over 35. And based on my experience working with a lot of streets, that's actually quite good. Part of the thing is people don't feel comfortable going all that fast on Milpas. If you're around other traffic, You feel constrained. It's not comfortable to go fast. One thing I should have mentioned during my presentation that I didn't is that while we were doing all our traffic counts, it was really interesting that we found that 2/3 of the traffic is using the inside lanes and only 1/3 is using the outside lanes. That was really interesting, and I think it just speaks to how uncomfortable people are driving that close to parked cars, buses at the bus stops. I found a lot of sideswipe crashes out there, but for every sideswipe crash that's reported, how many broken side mirrors, scratches, nicks are going unreported? We don't know. We have no way of knowing. So, those are some really interesting things that I found.
Thank you so much. The other thing that, talking about how Milpas is it's crammed so tightly, the roadway is crammed so tightly in there. When the new Fresh and Easy was framed out and I saw that there is absolutely no setback, it made me sick. It made me sick that in our city, people lose it if there's not a setback downtown. And the fact that that got approved in our city was shocking to me. And I wouldn't walk on the sidewalk right there. I'd be terrified. And there are other places on Milpas that, as a pedestrian, no matter what we do, I would absolutely avoid walking around there. And so from a holistic perspective, I'm glad our Planning Commission liaison is here. It's pretty unconscionable that hopefully that never happens again. We can't knock the thing down. It's not even built yet. But the fact that it would be that close to the roadway is frightening to me. I like the idea of the neighborhood transition striping or road diet, as Eva mentioned. It's been extremely effective in other places in our city. I live near that De La Vina corridor, and there aren't a lot of pedestrians, but I think for a few other reasons. But traffic flow is lovely. And also Cliff Drive, obviously, we've seen recently how much better that can be. I personally like the idea of that transitional striping, the idea that we would have marked bike lanes. As much as I love sharrows, which are better than nothing, a bike lane is obviously better and safer. And I also support the median refuge with the flashing lights on either side and in the middle. I think looking holistically at the Milpas corridor is something we should have done a long time ago. I hate that it had to happen this way. The other thing that I would note would be in the video they showed the pedestrian pushing the button, and it said, proceed with caution, press button to activate signal lights, proceed with caution. I'm not going to assume that this would be done, but I would request that those be bilingual in English and Spanish. And really any signage around that if there's a paddle or anything, I don't know if there's a standard, sign that can be in English and Spanish. If it'll fit on there, but that's something it may seem obvious to some, maybe not to others. And as far as the whole area, the young woman who spoke about Salinas, which is an absolute speedway, and is terrifying as well. Looking at things like that as we kind of move out further and pay a little more attention to the east side, I think is really important. But I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Blackerby. Mr. Kaufman-Gray.
Again, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. It's a very important issue. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Bailey. On both intersections, the diagram you have just shows it on the north side. Is that what the plan would be, only on the north side of those intersections?
One side or the other. At Ortega, what makes fitting something in difficult is on the southeast corner, right in this area here, the curb actually bulbs out into the road slightly by 4 or 5 feet. And The problem with that is that there isn't quite enough room to put something in there. It would, because the curb sticks out into the road right there, there isn't enough room. At Yananali is just an example. It could go on either side.
Okay. So if on this particular intersection, you're looking at not having any striping on the south side, then just leave it.
Right. We would encourage
people to go to the north
pedestrians.
side.
Yeah. If we were to install a facility like that, we'd certainly encourage them to use it.
Okay. And my other question is, particularly on this intersection, I do like the idea of the, transition striping to reduce the lanes there. Did staff look at doing curb extensions where the 7 feet on each side where the parked cars normally would be to make the pedestrian more visible to cars? Did you look at that option on this particular one?
Yes, sir. That's it's an alternative as well. When we look at doing combinations of things, we could do the striping transition in combination with the median refuge and curb extensions. I mean, there is room for all of those features.
'Cause I was surprised you didn't put that as an option for this intersection.
Okay. I actually have a drawing of it. I didn't include it in the report, but next time we come before the committee, I'd be happy to present that.
I cannot see it working further down because of the lanes being so wide, but for up here, if you do the transition striping, and if you were to do it just the 7 feet or whatever the width of a parked car would be, I would think it would make it pedestrian a lot visible, be able to cross. Okay, well, thank you so much for that.
If I could add one comment to that. One thing about the curb extensions with the striping transition, there's a lot of concern in the community about curb extensions and their impact to traffic and people hitting them. One thing about doing it in combination with the striping transition is they'd be quite visible. If you can, I'm just going to, where are we? Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. If we were to do a curb extension with this type of configuration, that curb extension would take place in this area here, outside of the bike lanes. So visually, you'd have these two thick white stripes running down the side of the road, guiding traffic past those curb extensions. So that may alleviate some of the objectionable.
Because the bike lanes would still be inside of where the curb extension.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. My other comments are, I think it's so important with having so many schools, especially around the Ortega area, the junior high school and the high school, that we've got to look at pedestrian access and encourage people to walk to school. So I definitely like the idea that transition lanes in the upper area of Milpas Street, with all the bells and whistles that have been talked about tonight. With the, I like the idea of the curb extension. I like those new flashing lights, and the medium island. I think all of those would work very well up at the Ortega intersection. I do not like the idea of moving bus stops. I do think it's counterproductive. We're encouraging people to ride buses and to make them to walk further to a different bus stop. I don't think that is the way to go with the city. Now, the other intersection at Yananali further down, definitely I can see where you cannot change the lanes. So it looks like the best route for that would be to do the the medium island with the flashing lights. And I don't think the curb extensions would work down there. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think it would be too much going on down there for that. But I definitely, the medium island with the flashing lights, I think would work well there. And that's really, if I had my way, I'd say let's put signals in like everyone else is saying, but unfortunately, the state has their rules and warrants based on a number of traffic counts, and I've been with other intersections in the city where the signal wasn't allowed, so we had to go other routes, which, thank goodness, other routes went recently. But I would say that, both of these we need to move forward and solve these intersections. I mean, the idea of a whole Milpas plan corridor, I think, years ago we did the Upper State Street plan to look at the whole area as a whole. And I think that's something that should be looked at for Milpas Street, too. But for the time being, I think it's critical that we move forward as timely as possible to get these two intersections taken care of. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman-Gray. I'd also like to recognize our Planning Commission liaison, Deborah Swartz, and I'd like to create a space for both you, Deborah, if you'd like to speak, and also our liaison from the Council, Catherine Murillo, if you have any comments.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. I won't comment on the proposal because it'll end up coming to me, but I do want to talk a little bit about tonight and the process. First of all, good evening to Senora Romero. On behalf of the City Council, I express my support as you grieve your son and come to these meetings as we try to figure out how we can prevent such a tragedy from happening again. On Tuesday night, we talked about Cliff Drive, which is owned by the state, and our hands are tied to make changes. It feels so good tonight to know that we can do something on Milpas, and this is very heartening and very exciting that we have power here. I'd like to recognize our Public Works directors. She's back there, Christine Anderson, and thank you to Sherry Fisher from MTD for staying. And we have a lot of fine city staff here as a testament, the commitment to making changes and helping safety on Milpas Street. And Mr. Bailey, I don't want to embarrass you, but I think you're an incredible asset to our Public Works Department and to the entire city. And I feel good things ahead for the city with your contribution. Ms. Aldana, we need to respond to your petition. I need to talk to the mayor about if you haven't received any kind of response to the fact that you've given a petition, we need to figure out a way just to say we received it, we're thinking about it. Same thing, Ava, I think Coast, Pueblo, and the Milpas Community Association sent us an email with some suggestions, and I think you are asking for a response, which maybe didn't come. So again, we need to figure out a way to at least acknowledge that, that we've received that kind of input. We need a process to at least acknowledge your communications. And those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilmember Murillo. I would love to ask one of our police department representatives. I have a quick question for you regarding our request from the public, from the group of Milpas Community Association, Pueblo, and I'm sorry, Mr. Aldana, what is NAC? Wow, I'm blanking. The Neighborhood Advisory Council on the request for, in terms of immediate steps for targeted enforcement and perhaps a speed trailer in that area.
Yeah, when it comes to traffic, there's the three E's: education, enforcement, engineering. And during the past year, the police department's been in a position where we haven't had much enforcement because we haven't had any traffic officers, basically, to be able to go out and do that enforcement. I'm the sergeant of the motor squad, and over the past year, we probably have only had 2 motorcycle officers. But on any given day, those motorcycle officers were taken out and put into a black and white to handle calls for service. So the reason that happened was because of the staffing levels at the police department got to a position where we have to answer 911 calls. So when somebody calls 911 and emergencies happen, we need to have officers that can respond to that. So that's why the traffic section was down to the level that it was. I'm happy to report that recently we've received our motor officers back, so a lot of them that were assigned to patrol temporarily have been assigned back to the motor squad. And we'll have about 5 motorcycle officers, including myself, that will be patrolling the city and doing specific enforcement in different areas. Right now,
the officers are being assigned beats, so that's kind of the same idea as a beat coordinator system. So we'll have officers on different beats in the city. We have 6 beats in the city, and each officer will be responsible for that area. That doesn't mean that they're the only person that's going to be there, because if we have an issue, we're going to tackle it with every officer that we have available, and we will be doing things. Look for pedestrian crosswalk stings coming up real quick, probably next week or two. Those are when we go out, we have an undercover officer that steps out into the crosswalk. We'll have about 5 or 6 motorcycle officers hiding around the corner, and we write a lot of tickets. It's pretty amazing how many tickets we do, how many violations we see. I mean, there's just a lot of very righteous, just blatant violations, and a lot of very near misses, very close near misses. And that happens all around the city, not only on Milpas Street, but we have done that on Milpas and Ortega in the past. So right now the marching orders are for the officers that are out there to give Milpas high visibility and enforcement right now. So I hope that you've seen more motorcycle officers in the area, because I appreciate the public. Eva has been a big supporter of the motor squad, and just getting our numbers back up to where they should be. So I appreciate all the comments you've made in the past, and I'm just happy to report that we're going to be back in action. The traffic trailer, that's the traffic engineering department, and we work very closely with them. We meet quarterly to just discuss any problems that might be going on throughout the city. So as a beat cop or the traffic officer, we talk about this and say, hey, we've seen this going on, and see if there's any kind of engineering angle that we can take to approach a traffic problem, or the radar trailer. So usually twice a week I'm talking to John Russo from the traffic engineering department, and he gets that trailer out. If I get a request, he's got it out real quick, so it's usually out that day. So, great. But we only have one, I think. We only have one trailer, so there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of complaints. The Hidden Valley, North End, Milpas, so we have to move it around to different neighborhoods, but that's what we do with that. And I'd just like to also commend Derek Bailey as well. He's been just a pleasure to work with since he's been here, and he's really taken just some leadership, and he's been great to work with, especially through this tragic incident that we have. And my heart goes out to the Romero family, and everybody's taken this very seriously. So proud of the city, and we're here to help. My phone number is 897-3720, and I would suggest that if you have any traffic problems, to please call me, because we will assign that to an officer. You will get follow-up. You'll get a phone call. We'll go ahead and target whatever we need to do, and we'll let you know how it goes as well. So,
thank you so much. Real quickly,
my name is Mike McGrew. Yeah.
So it's Sergeant McGrew, correct?
Yes.
So Sergeant McGrew, a question about the idea of a table board or some type of information piece that, in my thinking, maybe could be in part of, a full effort with a traffic trailer, with a crosswalk sting. Is there any precedent to have something put out that's a reminder or some kind of visual cue, or would that be something that either city engineering or that PD could do, or even is that even legal to put out a reminder of that the law is to yield to pedestrians?
I suppose that we could. The traffic trailer does. You are able to put out messages on that, so that could be something that we could do at the area. We're going to announce before we do the stings, and after we do the stings, we're going to announce that we're doing them. Great. And just let people know that if you do violate the crosswalk laws, you're going to get a ticket. And it's serious, it's dangerous, and it happens an awful lot. So on the education part, we also want to just caution people when you enter a crosswalk, just to remember that it's still dangerous. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sergeant McGrew.
Okay.
All right. I'd like to put in a couple quick comments to echo points made by our speakers, by our community members present tonight. First off, I am struck by how many comments are not just pertaining to Milpas and Ortega, nor just Milpas and Yananelli, but the entirety of the neighborhood. Enrico, you mentioned Salinas and Cacique and Yananelli. There's a comment, Ms. Simon, of just throughout that neighborhood along Alisos, the almost accidents that are occurring so regularly. We have the call for a Milpas revitalization plan. I have to say, and to echo your comment, Mrs. Blackerby, that we're responding to tragedies. And the city of Santa Barbara is about being proactive and striving to make this city great on an ongoing basis. And a critical part of that is the safety and the lack of a need for fear of our neighborhood residents to walk and live in their neighborhood. And I'm curious, obviously we're talking about immediate steps and this intersection in specifics, but what is on the drawing board for this, for the Milpas corridor and for the east side safety in general, in terms of midterm and long-term planning? Thank you for fielding that one, Mr. Allen. I appreciate that.
I was looking around the room and nobody would step up. Well, I can tell the committee we do not have anything in the near future in our capital improvement program to do any type of neighborhood transportation planning in the neighborhood. Mr. Bailey can take a look at the streets that were mentioned tonight to see if there's anything we can do from a traffic engineering standpoint. But in terms of the neighborhood planning efforts we've done in the past, it's not budgeted. We don't have any near-term future plans to do anything at this point in time.
Great. So is that a question, in terms of the neighborhood traffic calming project, is that just on hold since the Oak Park project, or have funding ceased for those planning projects?
Well, the answer to the question is yes for both. So we have not budgeted any money for that, primarily because our budget is tight. Our capital program budget is very tight, and we're struggling just to maintain our roadways. So we don't have the money to do a neighborhood traffic management program, and it's been placed on hold for just reasons where there's just not consensus among all the elected officials to move forward with one.
Okay.
So, but the main reason is we just don't have the funding to move forward with a program.
Okay, I appreciate that. And this might be a good question. I don't know if Mrs. Anderson is still with us. In terms of Upper State Street, which has been mentioned as a mirror for the potential of Milpas, what underwrote the Upper State Street, or should I say Outer State Street corridor study? And
how was that paid for?
How was that paid for? What was that process?
That was paid for out of the general fund, and that was, remember the city council had authorized the community development department to move forward with the Plan Santa Barbara, the general plan update, and that was put on hold to do the Upper State Street study, which, Public Works was involved in, and general fund monies were used to pay for that.
Right. Ms. Anderson, what are the options available for further study of neighborhood safety improvements, traffic calming, whatever it might be, for the Milpas corridor and these east side neighborhoods?
Thank you for the question. As you know, we have probably in the last 2 years been more constrained with fiscal limitations than Santa Barbara's experienced for many, many years. And I think we were fortunate in being able to hold on to a level of service that many communities were not able to achieve. But it did not mean that we were not untouched. And the focus for the planning efforts, I think, has been channeled into the Plan Santa Barbara update process, and that was the primary planning effort that the city was engaged in as a unit. And we had the program that supported neighborhood traffic calming that had been put in place several years earlier as a circulation element support program. And that was one that was removed from our budget process in about 2009, as I recall. 2008 was the last time we really had it identified in the budget. We're going through our budget adoption process for the second year of our 2-year budget. We don't, at this point, anticipate significant changes to our current level of service, but I can say that our most recent revenue picture is at least stabilizing. So I think it's going to be important to hear from the community about the interest in what things they're missing and that would be important for us to be prioritizing as we look at going into both the coming budget cycle and the next 2-year budget cycle planning effort. But currently, we just don't have anything in the 2012 budget that would enable us to launch a neighborhood transportation planning effort.
Great, thank you. So obviously it sounds like we have a lengthy process ahead of us. We have a planning commission meeting and then a joint meeting. I'm sorry, neighborhood advisory joint meeting. Is that correct, Browning?
Yeah, that is correct.
Great. So I don't think we need to get into too many terribly technical questions, but actually, Mr. Bailey, if I could ask you just a couple more, almost letting you off the hook for the night. So in terms of the traffic, the ADT, the average daily trips, how does this compare, not just to De La Vina, but Cliff Drive was not too long ago, and this is similar in terms of that option, not just to have the pedestrian beacon, but the median island. I'm sorry, would the median island necessitate those lane reductions, or those are separate options?
The median island could go with either the existing lane configuration, and like I said, there isn't enough room in the road right now just to add something. We have to create that space from somewhere. And if we want to keep the existing lane configuration of 2 lanes in each direction plus a center left turn lane, that space would have to come from the outside of the road. And that would basically mean bulbing the lanes out around that median refuge island. A median refuge island could also be installed with lane configuration like shown in the picture here.
So would that, if you did not do a reconfiguration of those blocks of Milpas that have lower average daily trips than lower Milpas, would that call into question the safety of that median island? Obviously, I'm imagining if you had to bulb around the median island, it might not be as safe of an option if more space was created. I guess what we're all after is what's the safest option here, and it sounds like you've put a lot of options on the table, and it seems like with only a 5-second average increase in time at Milpas and De La Guerra, we could reduce the number of lanes in those blocks, which are immediately adjacent to Santa Barbara High School and Santa Barbara Junior High, and not have double stack through the light. You could actually, everybody should, in most reasonable circumstances, be able to make it through the De La Guerra light on Milpas in one cycle. So it sounds like those are both options without lowering our level of service significantly.
Significantly is the key word there. Yeah, when we talk about levels of service, we use letters of the alphabet. A is good, F is bad, just like our grades in high school. These intersections along Upper Milpas right now are all operating in an A. Some movements might become a B if we were to take away a lane.
And unfortunately, level of service does not include safety or ease of access for pedestrians.
That's correct.
It's limited to motor vehicles only.
Yeah.
And I heard the comment, I believe, Ms. Byrne, you made the comment, I believe, pedestrian hostile, that many sections here are pedestrian hostile. So it sounds to me if in one of the worst scenarios, we're looking at level of service from A to B, and we're looking at doing everything we can for Ortega and Milpas to make that less pedestrian hostile. It sounds to me, at least, as a very worthwhile compromise that would be hard to argue against. And in terms of level of service for Yananali and Milpas. We're not looking at, there's not really possible to reduce the lanes. So I guess that wouldn't affect the level of surface, the median island.
Right. Milpas would still be free flow past Yananali. So from a driver's perspective, as long as there's not a pedestrian there, there'd be no change from what they experience today, other than the alignment which they travel through that intersection would change slightly.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you.
Those are my questions. So I really appreciate all of these options being presented, and even the mention of if we did have neighborhood transition striping, again, adjacent to two of our schools, Santa Barbara Junior High and Santa Barbara High School, the median island being viable, and even curb extensions being viable. Those aren't one of the options on the table now. I don't know what consideration those will have, but I think city staff is doing everything possible to improve safety for these two intersections. I think Mr. Bailey asked us to consider the questions of moving a bus stop, of potentially losing parking for this intersection improvement, and for the considerations of neighborhood transition striping that might involve the loss of a traffic lane. It sounds like to me the bus stop is not something that makes a lot of sense. But actually, while we're discussing this, and Ms. Fisher, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight for both your presentation and for you being here for this presentation. If you could speak to the issue of the bus stop, I would very much appreciate it. And again, this is moving a bus stop from its current location.
So there's two bus stops in question, the one at Milpas and Ortega, which is headed up to Anapamu, or what we call the inland side. Oh, thank you. Two bus stops in question. Milpas and Ortega going up toward Anapamu. At that particular bus stop, we have 142 people boarding per day and 28 people getting off the bus. And then, in the same token, Milpas and Yananali headed toward the beach with 53 passengers a day, 21 of them boarding and 32 getting off the bus. So it kind of gives you a feel for the use. The good news is that in the case of Milpas and Ortega going up, there is another bus stop that's within about a block, or perhaps even considered less, so that the loss of that bus stop would not be a big loss to those passengers in terms of the steps that they would need to take, although I recognize that I say that gently because I'm a walker, and that for some people that would be more difficult. If it's a way to make that intersection safer, we would be happy to drop that bus stop. And again, I say that gently. I know for some people that's not an option, but it looks okay to me. As far as Yananali southbound, it's a little bit further to the next bus stop. The one that would be past that would be right in front of McDonald's, giving them a little plug there, straight in front of it. Again, if from a traffic engineering point of view, that's the way to make that intersection safer, we would be willing to drop the stop. But I'm hearing from a lot of other people they don't like that option. Just hearing that tonight. But for us, it would be acceptable. So I know that sounds wishy-washy, but I want to do what's the safest thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for addressing the concern of the bus stop. The traffic lane, again, Mr. Bailey, your comment?
Yeah. If I could just add a few more bits of information about the bus stop. With this configuration at Ortega, by building a second ramp around the corner right here, this is right in the middle of the bus stop. So if keeping the bus stop is very important to the community, we could still do a median refuge island here, but it would have to look like the one we're proposing for Yananali. Something like that. And that way the bus stop could stay right here. Another thing to consider about the bus stops is buses are big vehicles. The bus stop at Yananali is here, southbound. A bus stopped in this lane right here might obstruct the flashers. Again, we would have them in two other locations on the road, but it is something to consider.
Right. Liaison.
May
Maria.
I ask, Mr. Allen, what is the process by which we could do a site visit to those bus stops? And maybe Coast could host us. Unless I'm there and kind of seeing, and maybe we can talk to some of the bus riders who are coming and going, or Ms. Fisher, I see. Is that possible? Is that a good idea?
Ms. Fisher.
If that's something the committee is interested in, obviously we'll make a bus available to you to take you to that stop as a group. So.
Great.
This is site visits is something normally this committee does not do. I think we've only done it once. I think it was Pershing Park project, but certainly that's something that we could agendize. Would be an agendized, noticed meeting, and we could do it in advance of the March meeting if that's something the committee would like us to do.
Great. Is there? It definitely sounds like this is something that, and I thank you, Mr. Bailey, for clarifying that would be important for both the option of removing the crosswalk and for this option of the median island. So that said, this needs to be considered. Are members of this committee amenable to having a field trip, site visit? If necessary. It's also, we could, I don't know if we need to have the whole committee to do that. It's a very important consideration. Is there a way that doesn't need to be a properly notified meeting?
If it's less than 4 members, it will not be a Brown Act violation. We could do that. So it could easily be the chair and the vice chair and one other member. If that's really the pleasure of the committee, how you would like to handle it. I could have Kim send an email out to poll the committee's members to see who would be available on certain days. We most likely do it in the afternoon or the morning. We'll probably pick either the morning or PM peak hour, so we can see what the highest volume of traffic is, so you can get a better feel for the roadway at the worst, for lack of a better word, worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So it's really up to the pleasure if you want to try and have a majority of the committee there or just.
Thank you, Mr. Browning. I think having representatives of this committee do that would probably be the most feasible option, and later figuring that by email, Kim, I would appreciate. It'd be great. I certainly would be willing if that works for time, but it depends on what time a group of us would be available. Mr. Kaufman-Gray.
Well, I think you should ask the whole committee as a whole if the whole committee wants to do it.
Okay.
And put it to a vote, and then we can decide, and we could be emailed and figure out what would be a good time to do it.
Okay. Yeah. That's Mrs. Horn. Ms. Horn.
I just wanted to say I'm not clear about the purpose. If it's to see the traffic there, which a visit would show, and which I've done independently, or if you really want to talk to people, which would be very random. What is your idea of the benefit of it?
Good. So I would clarify. The benefit would be consideration of removing of that bus stop, and so it would be worth just to see. And I don't think we necessarily need the full committee to be there in one group. This happens every day. How many times a day? Lunch break, go out, or certainly a small group of us could go out without violating the Brown Act. Just so when this comes back to us in our joint meeting with the Neighborhood Advisory Council, we could better get a feel of whether or not we think that's a fair trade-off to remove that bus stop. But
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Buckedy.
I don't really see why it's particularly burdensome to just notice it and have as many members of the committee come as possible. If they can't make it, they can't make it. But like Browning said, we can pull the committee. I think it's important. Also, in theory, we would have someone from MTD there. We'd have someone, we'd have Derek there so that we could, ask questions and see what it looks like. Okay, so what I would also suggest is in the future meetings, maybe amending the PowerPoint slide a little more, maybe for the Neighborhood Advisory Committee in February, of if you move it or remove it, where do you move it to? Because that's not, it's kind of hard to get your mind around just imagining that it might either go away or move up half a block or whatever. So seeing those options at future meetings I think would be helpful, but I'd love to do a site visit. I'd drive past there all the time, but to actually get out of my car, park it somewhere safely, and walk around, or ride a bus, heaven forbid, right? Then we could get a good picture, and I think it'd be good for all of us to see.
Great. Is that a motion?
I don't know if we need a motion, but I think we have some consensus. I think it's an issue that's going to be scrutinized very carefully, and if that's what it takes to scrutinize it carefully, I think that's what we should be doing.
So I think we have enough information from the committee.
So by consensus, we'd like to do that. Great.
Kim will poll the committee members to find what the availability is.
Cool. Thank you so much for doing that. Ms. Fisher, thank
Chair
you.
France. Do I keep doing this? No, come on. Chair France and members of the committee, I also want to echo what Mr. Bailey said about a near-side bus stop being difficult for drivers to see around us. We are 9 feet wide. Out of that 10 feet that the lane has, we're taking up most of it. So that if you are waiting to cross the stop there, it's much more difficult when the bus is stopped near side. Again, the conversation about where we'll be, where we won't be. And the nice thing about coming out to do a site visit is you would be giving the community an opportunity to come talk to you there too.
Great.
So no matter what happens, we always want to welcome the community to that discussion at our board or at your meeting, but both would be fine. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Yes. Our liaison from Planning Commission, Deborah Schwartz.
Thank you, Chair France. Deborah Schwartz, Planning Commission liaison to your committee. As I've listened to both the community and your committee tonight, I'd like to go back to the Upper State Street design guidelines that allowed us to take time out from our general plan update process, and with a subcommittee of the Planning Commission along with other stakeholders, engage the community along with city decision makers in a very rigorous and thoughtful and comprehensive process so that we're not just approving projects or changes to our city on a one-off basis. A fresh and easy project comes along for better or worse, we hope for better for the community, because it's a one-off project. And I think the desire, even the anguish that's come out of this very tragic incident with the death of Sergio Romero really should give us pause to not only look at the short-term tactical measures, improvements on Milpas, but I think, and I'd like to suggest this, and I'd like to talk with Councilmember Murillo at another time about this, galvanizing us at this time, even with fiscal constraints, as Ms. Anderson mentioned, to undertake a long-term visioning and strategic planning process for the entire Milpas corridor and the east side. I think the time is now. Certainly there's a pent-up desire by the community for this, and I don't think we should wait until there's possibly such time in the future when we have much more financial resources, because I don't know that's going to be coming anytime soon, and I don't think that we can afford to continue to put long-term strategic planning of the Milpas corridor and the east side on the back burner any longer. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So great. The bus stop, I'm really glad. Thank you, Ms. Blackerby, for pushing the suggestion that we all meet. That is a very good idea, and that'll be open to the community. Thank you for the idea. I do want to mention the other two items that Mr. Bailey brought to our consideration were considering the removal of a traffic lane among those blocks and also losing parking. These need a lot more outreach to adjacent businesses and to the community. Again, this is a very charged and important project, but these improvements, and I want to thank the city for a very well-considered process where we're not making a decision suggesting to council today. We're bringing in a lot of input so that we can make a vetted community decision. And we've seen some of the technical information, but that's needed to go out to the community. We need to, and I don't know what's going to happen in terms of noticing to the local businesses and residents of these considerations. Brandon, can you speak to that, Mr. Allen?
Well, one of the purposes, the primary purpose of tonight's meeting is to introduce the options that the city has come up with for addressing the concerns on Milpas Street. And it's televised. Hopefully members of the community are watching, as well as the people here in the room. And we have a representative from Coast. We have a representative from the Milpas Community Association, and we need them to weigh in, as a group, to let us know which of these options they will support before we bring it back before this committee. So the reason we're coming back at the end of March is to give us enough time to engage the community, to give input to the city into which of these options they would recommend or support going forward to the city council. So the next step after the neighborhood advisory council meeting would be for staff to sit down with the various groups to seek their input.
Great. Thank you. So that said, I think that's the balance of my comments. Clearly, there is strong desire to address, with all of the options available to us, safety improvements for Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali. Clearly, there is also a strong desire and a need for a more comprehensive process, so that we're not, as Planning Commissioner Schwartz has mentioned, we're not just constantly talking about one-offs, this intersection and that intersection, and responding in crisis and tragedy instead of proactively. And so that's something that hopefully this process will also help to better galvanize. And the community coming and sitting at a long evening meeting like this is what's going to help make that happen. Allow me last comments. That's it. I think I want to thank staff
Mr.
for.
Chair?
Yes, Mr. Kaufman-Gray.
I have one other comment before we get into this item. I'd like to make sure that staff comes back with the option with the curb extensions on the intersection of Ortega and Milpas to see what that would look like as a possibility.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kaufman-Gray. Yes, Ms. Blackerby.
I know it was mentioned before. I know that staff's a little gun shy on the curb extension for very obvious reasons over the past 2 years. But I gotta say, I would really like to see our city. I think things have changed. I think if you look at who's sitting at this table right now, obviously things have changed in our city leadership. And so instead of being gun shy and assuming that the community will come after you with pitchforks if you propose a curb extension, which actually does make it safer for pedestrians, just good planning practices, good traffic safety practices sometimes include curb extensions, and that's okay. And I would like to see, if it's something that Mr. Kaufman-Gray brought up that seems fairly feasible, then that should be listed as an option. We can always say no, council can vote it down, whatever, but giving us all the options possible and not being gun shy, which again I understand, but giving us the full palette of things to work with so that we can make our city safer is really appreciated.
Mr. Sachs, if you'd like to make a comment, I appreciate your time, so please do.
We talked about a lot of obstacles, a lot of different ways that people can physically see that someone's crossing the street. I wondered if it would be feasible if the city got a hold of the news stations and asked them to make a statement at the end of the show. Pedestrians have the right of way. Watch out for pedestrians crossing the street. Bob Barker, who ran Price is Right, went on for years. At the end of his show, he says, have your dogs and cats neutered or spayed. It's effective. It's very effective. If you put all this effort in and you don't educate, like Sergeant McGrew said, as part of the process. And I think it would be a cheap and very effective, and it would go way beyond Milpas. It would go over everywhere. People are not aware of this law, like I mentioned earlier.
Perfect.
I think it would be very helpful and something you could do tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. I appreciate that. That's a very helpful suggestion. We have members of the news media here tonight, and again, it must be understood that motorists must yield to pedestrians in intersections. So, lastly, I wanted. I'm sorry, just lost my train of thought, but I did want to mention I appreciated in your notes, Mr. Bailey, the mention that if the neighborhood transition striping were to occur, it would leave the space and the option of, in the future, as funds and political will and interest would be available, for widened sidewalks. And the Fresh and Easy example Ms. Blackerby brought up, Milpas especially has some of the most narrow sidewalks. You kind of have to move sideways to walk through, at least on Haley and Milpas. So thank you for putting that mention out there. One thing I want to say, it is known in the biking and walking community that there's safety in numbers. As more people walk and bike in their neighborhoods, motorists see them. And motorists take into account that if somebody is slowing down, they shouldn't swerve past them, that it's likely that they will see a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And everything that we can do to encourage walking in our neighborhoods is also encouraging safety in our neighborhoods, because of a statistically well-researched and well-shown fact that there is safety in numbers for pedestrians. So again, thank you for the staff for presenting very well thought out, very well articulated options for the community, and for laying out a well thought out and well timed process for us to bring these suggestions ultimately to council. So that said, we are only here to receive a report. So any final comments from the group? Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone here tonight to speak on this item. We'll next move to our fifth item, selection of chair and vice chair for this committee. I've served as chair, and Ms. Blackerby has served as vice chair. We have a traditional one-year cycle where we alternate members of the committee as chairs. I don't know if we've had the time to properly mention to everyone on the council. I know Ms. Horn, as per the rotation, you would actually be selected if you're willing to serve as the vice chair. Ms. Blackerby, you would be selected to serve as the chair. I believe you have been better prepared for that position as vice chair to step up as the chair. Ms. Horn, that is absolutely at your pleasure and your preference, whether or not you are willing to serve this committee as a vice chair. I don't know if you have a comment or thought on that.
Well, having served 1 year, I'm not prepared to take on that job at this year.
That is absolutely understandable.
And this is the first I've heard of it, so.
Okay. As such, traditional passing downs sometimes go, and I'm sorry that this item was not better vetted. Ms.
We
Blacker,
typically would take the member of the committee to serve as vice chair who has not served in that capacity, and all the other members of the committee have either been chair or vice chair, so that's why you were slated.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wondered why.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We would take you under our wing.
So, Mr. Allen, if you could speak real quickly to the tradition of how this committee has alternated chairs.
What the committee has done in the past was done probably 6 or so years ago.
Sorry, could we, if you're still in the room for the meeting, we're still continuing the meeting. If we could maybe be down.
Good.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you again, Mr. Allen.
Okay, so the way the committee has chosen to do it is whoever was the vice chair would automatically rotate into the chairmanship. And that was something the committee made as a policy a number of years ago. And then they would select a vice chair. Typically, the committee would select a member who had not served as chair or vice chair to serve as vice chair of the committee. The vice chairmanship is really more at the pleasure of the committee how you want to select that, but it was pretty much understood that if you became the vice chair, you'd be the chair of the following calendar year.
Great. And this is informal, so the vice chair doesn't necessarily need to become chair the following year.
They could decline to be chair the following year because if they don't feel like they're ready to be it, or work commitments, or they just don't want to do it, or they just want to remain vice chair. And certainly the committee could select a person who has been chair or vice chair to be vice chair again, or chair for that matter. It's really up to the committee. The committee just tried to get some continuity in terms of the leadership of the committee and in terms of the chairmanship.
Got it. Ms. Blackerby, I am interested what you think about this process and your interest and willingness to serve as chair of the Transportation and Circulation Committee.
Oh, so formal. I'm interested. I'd be happy to serve as chair, as long as we don't call it a chairmanship anymore. And I know it's been a long time coming. Before I got on the committee, there were no women on it at all. So it takes time. It takes time to change the language about it. But no, all kidding aside, I'd be happy to, and would, if there's anyone else on the committee other than Ms. Horn that would be willing to serve as vice chair, be happy to have you. I know we've got some very experienced folks on the committee as it is, so be interested to see if anyone is interested in being in that role again.
Are there any comments, any expressions of interest from any members of this committee as a vice chair? And we're not a full committee today, so I'd love to hear any comments. I'd also love to perhaps forward a motion to appoint a chair and not yet do a vice chair unless we have willingness to serve in that capacity.
Well, I'll move to appoint Hillary Blackberry as chair of the TCC for next year.
All right, Ms. Blackerby, our chair. So the motion is on the table. I will second that motion. All four?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
I'll abstain, I suppose.
By consensus, we have appointed Chair Blackerby. Thank you for taking on that responsibility. And
just in terms of a vice chair, just to remind the committee, Mark Bradley, who's not here tonight, was the chair in 2010. So it's really, if it's going to be one of the prior members, it would either be Member Tabor, Kaufman Gray, or Pritchett. If we're looking at,
I mean, I'll do it again, but I've been chair to be past too, so someone else, if someone else wants to do it, that's great.
My only concern in thinking about it was that I've been here so long. This may be my last year on the TCC, and that would mean there'll be a total leadership void going into the following season. So I think that's a concern that we want to look into before we step off that void.
yeah, one thing we didn't mention is, as per our membership, we may lose a member, and I may also step down from the committee, depending on what my work roles, what happens with different work roles that I have. That said, I guess we'll have to address that in our next meeting, as it's not agendized. I know, Mr. Allen, if there are openings in the committee, how would we proceed?
any vacancies in the committee would be handled in the semi-annual recruitment that will handle this spring.
Right.
And it shouldn't, we will only probably have one meeting where that would be affected.
Okay.
Seeing that we're meeting quarterly.
Okay.
Question.
Ms. Blackerby, Chair Blackerby.
Okay. What I'm wondering is, could we select a vice chair today, and at any point that person, throughout the year, if they decide that they don't want to do it anymore or can't, we can always elect a different vice chair.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is that something that folks might be amenable to? Mr. Kaufman-Gray? Okay. Well, I would move that we select Mr. Kaufman-Gray as vice chair.
Second.
All right. All four?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Kaufman-Gray, if you're willing, any comment? Are you willing to serve in the capacity of vice chair?
Sure.
Great. We didn't record. Great. Well, yeah. All four? Yeah, we yayed it. Great.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, and then meeting schedule for 2012. So, Mr. Allen, could you quickly run us through, now that we're all brain dead late into the night, what the changes are for this schedule?
Well, traditionally, the committee, in fact, when it was first created, would meet the fourth Thursday of every month if we had a need, and then we moved to quarterly, and it was the fourth Thursday in the quarter, and then the request of a committee member, Pritchett, we moved it to the second Thursday because he had work commitments, and that was during the 2011 calendar year. So it's before the committee tonight to see if we want to go back to the fourth Thursday or keep it at the second Thursday.
So what's before us is fourth Thursday, which is what it was originally?
Correct.
Okay.
I just
Did anyone have standing conflicts on that day?
I have a question. Maybe this is obvious and I'm not looking at it the right way. And in the calendar that we've been given in August, is there a reason why it's on a Wednesday? It's the fourth Wednesday, August 22nd.
Yeah, it's a typo.
Okay. I was like, I understand why November and December are moved up because of the holidays, but I didn't. Unless you guys want to meet on Thanksgiving, but I don't. So, but okay. So just August would be August 23rd, and then
December actually should be December 13th if we meet in December.
December 13th. Okay. So while we're amending this, is that have we switched this? Do we want to do off month TCC? Are we in off today, and we're only doing this due to the pressing need for Milpas? Or would we actually like to transpose the off month? Because that's just available for us to meet.
Let's see, actually, Ms. Chair, since you're the chair now, the way I look at it, we just had our scheduled meeting in January.
Right.
So the one in March is an off meeting, the one
Right.
that's scheduled on the 22nd. So we would still have our April 26th meeting.
That's correct if we have a matter that we want to bring before the committee.
okay. So, are folks okay with this proposed schedule as amended, as we just discussed, with the change in August, change in December, and then obviously January? We're here right now. Is that fine? Okay. So, is there a motion to approve the schedule?
I move to approve the schedule.
Second.
Second.
Third.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So,
Madam Chair, I have
Yep.
one question. In the past, we've gotten a roster of the members, just how to contact, and I know we didn't get it last year, but the year before, what Browning has in his book. And I know it's only given to the members as a confidential list, but I think it's very helpful for us to have that.
We can get you a current list.
Okay, that'd be great. Because this last week I wanted to contact somebody, and I realized I did not have their email address.
That won't be a problem.
Okay.
and
We all have that.
Yeah, we'll send it to all members, and just remind the committee members, if you do email anybody in the committee, just email no more than 2.
right. And I had one thing having to do with the kind of similar communication. I know that some members of the committee have expressed frustration to me, and I have my own frustrations about communication from staff when items that have come before our committee go to council, that we're not all watching what's happening at council every week or what's coming up, and so letting us know if there's something that's coming up. Like this past Tuesday, there were two items, Cliff Drive and De La Vina, Figueroa, and Canon Perdido. Some of us figured it out because we were watching, and some had no idea. So I personally would really appreciate just keeping us in the loop, just with an email of saying, hey, next week this is coming up, and if you'd like to partake or go see or at least read a staff report, that would be really helpful. Okay. All right. Anything else? No?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Second? Second. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We stand adjourned. Thank you.